Hello, 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 and welcome back to This Is Me Attitude podcast with me, your one and only host, Rachel Nelson, just a girl in her 20s, trying to figure this crazy life out and bringing you along the way every single step of the way. Welcome back to This Is Me Attitude podcast. I am so very excited to have yet another guest speaker on. Today I have Mareshah with me. Her and I met through basically a mutual friend on Facebook or on a connecting group. I have recently done a lot of networking on different Facebook groups and met a lot of amazing people through it. And there's one group particular that is of Christian women, and I'm pretty sure that's the one that we met on. And our conversation has been really exciting ever since. And I also think that she originally reached out to me to be on the podcast. So I'm really excited that the podcast is growing and just to be able to have you on the show. So welcome, Mareshah.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm proud of you. You're doing good. I'm so proud of you. This is awesome.
Thank you. And before we really jump into the questions, is there anything else that you would like in your intro? Because I want to make sure I give you a full intro to the audience.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm Mareshah H, and I'm also a podcaster, and my podcast is called the Calf and Blazer Podcast. So I think that's pretty much why we were on the same page, is like looking for Christian podcast people to like just really be in fellowship with. So yeah, just I'm glad to be here and talk to you. So
Amazing. It definitely sounds like we're in the right spot then and have very like-minded and being able to grow in with the Lord and in podcasting because I've had a lot of fun just really talking with people and their stories and being able to share my own.
mhm.
And with that, listeners, we
This means, guys, Rachel will be coming to mind, so we're gonna hold her to it because it's recorded.
yeah, it is recorded. What we're saying is all out there now. So
No, but I would love to have her too. So I'm really excited for you though. I love your message that you put out there. So
thank you. And yes, I will definitely love to come on more podcasts. So that is a great connection. And I'll have to like remind myself to ask you about that later. But as always, when I have a guest speaker on, I have a few different questions that we'll run through. Some of them, if you've listened to the podcast before, you've probably heard these specific questions. Some are specific to Mareshah and her experience, as we've talked about a little bit before. And with that, I'll jump right into the first question of when and how did you become a Christian or accept Jesus into your life?
so I grew up in a Christian home. So that was kind of how I was introduced to it, or how I became a Christian as a little girl. Um, there's a point when my parents would ask us, "Do you want to be saved?" They would wait until we were old enough to kind of understand it, but they would explain salvation and go through it with us. And one day I told my mom I did, and I said the prayer of accepting Jesus in my heart, and then I got baptized in my bathtub. So I think it was about 5 or 6. Yeah. So
Wow,
that's pretty much how like my Christian walk for myself started.
that's amazing. I give your parents a lot of credit for being able to show the Christian life and then really giving it the option for you and your siblings. That sounds like a really cool experience. Um,
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Which I'm sure with growing up with that, you were just kind of used to it, and I'm sure that that is just a normal thing in the family. But I haven't heard that before, and just how open and loving that is in a family to grow up in. So that's really cool.
It is. And I do have to say, just just because I grew up in Christianity doesn't mean there were some things that had to grow in our family. Um, I don't agree with everything went the way it went. um, I've had to actually grow in my relationship on my own with God. So, but I don't, what I am grateful for is that they introduced me to Him, and introducing me to the Lord was the best thing they could have done. And I know they did the best they could with what they knew. So I don't hold against them anything that now that I see as I'm older is how, what God really does say and what he means about certain things. But I I would have never been introduced had they not, at least had it learning their own relationship. So yeah, so pretty much now that I'm older, my relationship has grown, and it's with him, not just part of it. Sometimes when you're a kid and you grow up in a Christian home, I don't know if it's like for anybody else, but your relationship kind of is with God because your parents are in a relationship with God. You go to church because your parents said get up and go to church on Wednesday, Thursday, right? Yeah, all the days. um, and so you're kind of going because you don't have a choice to not go sometimes. But and it didn't mean that I didn't learn things in those times. But it just when I got grown, I really did realize, oh, I have to know God for myself, and that was a big shift.
That's really honestly smart of you to see the difference because I have definitely seen a lot. I didn't grow up in a quote unquote Christian home. Like my parents
Hmm.
and my younger sibling, like we all believed that God was real, but I didn't understand the actual having a relationship with him until I was out of the house. Um,
Hmm.
but just in the fact of you can't live through your parents' faith. Like yes,
Yeah.
in growing up in a Christian home, you obviously want to listen to your parents and be a nice child or however you want to say that in
Yeah.
that term, and you know that you need to listen.
Obedient. Yeah.
Obedient is the best way to say it. Um, but I can only imagine there were some Sundays you're like, I don't want to get out of this bed. I don't want to go to church. Go. I mean, I feel like that is an adult now. Is I'm the one that wants to go to church. And I'm like, but the bed is so cozy.
Right.
um,
I go to bedside Baptist today. Um, yeah, I agree. And there was a part where um, I know one of the things you asked in one of the questions you sent me beforehand is where did you see God most in your life? And I think though, although I was that was part of our growing up, there were moments when I knew God was real for myself, even as a little girl.
mm,
So that helped too. That helped me not stray as much when I got older. Although I was still a teenager, I still did stuff. I still didn't always all and listen, I'm still learning. God's still working on me. But even in some of the moments when I was a little kid, there were moments that I just could not explain. That I knew it was God without a shadow of a doubt. So I always knew he was real and that he loved me and he cared for me. Um, that helped too. Like when he would, I was when I was, I think a preteen, maybe a little bit younger. Um, I there was a car accident and I got ran over by the car. Um, and part of the way I grew up is their belief was that they don't believe in doctors, so they did not take me to a hospital. So you can imagine the excruciating pain I was in as a little girl, healing from that. And I think the very first time I really heard him audibly is when I was laying in that bed in excruciating pain, and I heard it. You don't get up, you won't be able to walk. Like you have to get up. You're gonna have to get up and walk. And I remember listening to all the kids outside playing and thinking, I can't go play. I'm in pain. And I heard it clear as day, like you're gonna have to get up. Nobody's coming to get you. You're going to have to get up. And I remember just getting up and walking down the hall in pain, back and forth until I could do it. And so there are moments when I can't explain to you how I knew it was God talking to me. But if I had laid in that bed and just laid there, I don't think I would be able to walk the way I do now. I don't think my relationship with God would be the same just because I knew that he wasn't going to allow the way my parents believed not allow me to see his glory and his healing. So
mhm.
I do know that there are moments like that where I can't explain how it happened, but I'm doing something that most people wouldn't believe that I should be walking. So it's like I know that's where I've seen him show up, and when I saw him show up there, I was like, there's moments where you get dark and you're like, but he'll show up again because he showed up in that moment. Like it's like proof.
Mhm.
That's what I held on to, even if there were things I didn't agree with how my father did them. What I did know was God was real. Some people in Christianity take Christianity and use it for how they can move it toward what they want it to do, so that
Yeah.
it forms what they want to believe. Um, so in those moments, I wasn't mad at my dad. I just knew, even though I didn't know all the answers, I would know that, okay, maybe it's not exactly that way, but I do know he's real. And that's what matters. And I know he showed up when I needed him. So
Thank you for sharing that story. That is a huge faith moment in just seeing how real he really is, and being able to see that at such a young age is, I think, also shows a lot in how you were being obedient to the Lord in general. As I'm
mhm.
sure that in that moment of feeling in pain, and you're like, that's the last thing I want to do right now is get up, God. Like, well, what
Yep.
would you mean? Um, and I think that a full grown adult would think that after going through a traumatic thing like that. So I can only imagine the pressure and not feeling good added on top of being a kid.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. And for the listeners, I hope that you take that story as just one proof that God is here and does want the best for us, and that it's not always an easy road. By signing up and being a Christian
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's going to be a cakewalk the rest of your life. And that is, I think,
There you go.
the almost stereotypes that a lot of non-believers think. They're like, oh well, if I just go this and say yes to God, like everything's going to be fantastic after. And that is probably one of the biggest lies that
Yep.
probably the enemy wants you to believe, because as soon as you say that you're God's child, you got a target on your back for the enemy. And I
Yep.
felt that firsthand. I had a lot of different experiences about a year and a half ago now that happened, that I was like, oh, that's real. Got it. Okay. We're not
Yeah.
gonna take that for lightly at all anymore. And I just, for some reason, I just felt called to add that in there, because as we go about this conversation and share our experiences, if it sounds like, oh well, Rachel and Marcia have everything set and everything together,
Hmm.
their life just looks perfect. Well, you're only seeing one aspect of it, first of all. Second, I can promise you, guarantee you, my life is not perfect. Nor
Yes.
is any other Christian's walk perfect. The only one that was perfect that walked the earth is Jesus. So,
Hmm. There you go.
just that as a little bit of a reminder as well. So, I'll dive back into the questions with, what is the biggest thing that God delivered you from?
I think uh, most recently fear, like debilitating fear and shame. Um, I had grown up with some things that had happened to me as a young girl, um, where I was hurt. And so, for instance, as a little girl, I was stalked by a neighbor, and then hurt, eventually hurt by that neighbor. And then in my teens, was then hurt again. And so it kind of instilled in me this fear of people, or fear of being hurt, fear of not being protected, all of those things. So you develop your own coping mechanism to
Mhm.
deal with that. And as a kid, I developed extreme control issues. I needed to be in control. If nobody will ever hurt me again, if I just control everything around me, um, then you can't hurt me. If I don't let you see my bad part, if you don't know anything about me, if I'm just perfect, it also caused a lot of perfectionism in me. If I'm just perfect, then nothing bad will happen. Huh, that's a lie. And it's a cycle. So you're trying to be perfect, bad stuff happens, and you try to be perfect more, and bad stuff happens, and you try to control more, and you can't control. It's a never ending cycle. But in the core of that was shame and fear. Shame of what happened to me, and then fear of that, just I had to fear anything because I didn't feel protected. Um, so I know that um, one of the things like you talk about, you just said, which I thought was so good, that people as Christians think like that means you have this perfect life and nothing bad ever happens. Part of that was my way of living as a Christian. So okay, then I just have to show the good parts of me.
Mhm.
I don't want anybody to see the bad parts. I'll just control everything. And then when things would go out of control or things would happen, I would spiral very bad, because no matter what I did, I couldn't stop bad from happening. I couldn't stop hard things from occurring. So one of the things I did do is I started getting in counseling. Well, I've been in counseling for like over 7 years.
Oh, wow.
The greatest thing I've ever done. Just learning, going through the trauma and learning and picking apart the layers of where things started. Why are you perfectionist? Because I need everybody to think if I'm just good enough, you won't hurt me or nothing bad will happen, or all those lies that you start telling yourself because of things on the outside that will happen. Life will happen, and there will be bad things that people will do, and not knowing how to face that, I used old coping mechanisms that I thought worked. And the other thing is learning that what you do as a child, the coping mechanism you may use as a child, don't always work anymore as an adult. When you use what you used as a child, when you do it as an adult, everybody's like, "What are you doing?" But your mind, you think I'm just doing what kept me. You did need it as a child, but when you're an adult, you don't need it anymore. And that's when you have to start finding the new way, or the healthier way to deal with things. Well, that's what led me to counseling is okay, I have to find a healthier way to do this because what I'm doing doesn't work. Controlling, being a control freak, being a perfectionist, being wanting everybody to like you, you know, people pleasing. If I just do this, you'll like me. If then you won't get mad at me. Never wanting to really face adversity. Didn't like hard conversations. I will hide. I would, I would think I'm not happy. Withdrawing and things like that. Just ways of coping. But as an adult, you can't do that anymore. And then it started spiraling out of control because I couldn't keep using the old coping mechanism. It was affecting relationships. It was affecting me as a mom. It was affecting everything, my jobs. And if anybody knows me, my daughter and my family are the biggest thing. And when it starts affecting that, I was like, okay, I can't pass this on to my daughter. If
Yeah.
that's the one thing I will not do, is I will not pass my dysfunction on to her. She's going to have a life of her own that's going to be enough with just life. Life be lifing, so to
Yeah.
speak. Not the correct way to say it, but it does. And I don't want to add my trauma onto her, whatever she's going to have to face anyways.
Mhm.
So that was one of the biggest drivers, and to just stop generational stuff from happening. I noticed that people in my family all handled um, things different, like not in the most healthy way. And I was just like, I gotta stop it.
Yeah.
And if it stops with me, then it stops with me, because then I don't pass it to my daughter. So one of the things I did do is just start the counseling, and that's one of the things that just helped me start taking things off layer by layer by layer. And that was one of the greatest things. So I can recommend anything to anybody. If you're going through something and people tell you counseling doesn't work, counseling is also like a relationship and a friendship. Sometimes you got to court it, and if it ain't working, move to the next one. It's
Yeah.
okay to do that. Like, I wish people would understand, like, don't give up after the first one. You
Yeah.
got to keep going, because it is a relationship you build, um, of trust and the right help too. Like sometimes you'll get in there and it's just not gelling. So I would encourage people, definitely get help. There are free programs out there. There are free ways to get help. Um, you just have to go. You just have to dive for it.
Thank you so much in sharing all of that. I truly feel like I could connect on so many different aspects that you said with shame and guilt and the people pleasing. And just if you shake your head, yeah, then you don't have to go into the confrontation or that big
Yeah.
conversation with somebody. Oh my God,
Yep.
I was the one that did that with my family. I mean, this is very well known now. My parents are divorced, and it was not a very good marriage when I was in high school because when I left for college is when they officially split. And that whole time in high school, I was just like, if I just shake my head and do this, like mom and dad won't get mad and I'll just have the cheesy smile on my face and then it'll be great.
Hmm.
Now that I'm older, like that's one of the things that people are like, what are you doing, Rachel? Like you look kind of like a lunatic with that smile. And I was like, oh yeah, we actually have to process that now and like
Yep.
have to talk about it when all I want to do is smile and be like, it's going to be okay. When really you don't know if it's going to be okay or not in that instance. And also for the listeners, in talking about counseling or going to therapy or talking to somebody else about the things you're going through, one one of the biggest things that I've heard is people are like, "Well, they'll not understand. They don't know my story, or they haven't gone through
Mhm.
the same thing." You might be right in the fact that maybe if you come talk to me through social media, I have not gone through your same story, or if you go talk to a therapist, they have not gone through your same exact thing. But in a therapist aspect, they go to school to do this. They go and get the
Mhm.
training to be able to talk to you about certain aspects or the way that your brain works overall and things like that, that it helps in being able to relate and understand at least where you're coming from a little bit to have a starting point, and then for you to talk through it. Myself, I go to therapy every other week, and really it's just a spot that I get to like dump all my stuff and be like, "This is what I'm working on, and this is what I'm going through." And she'll just
Absolutely.
listen to me, and it has been so beneficial. And I cannot recommend it enough, like we were mentioning before. And I just wanted to add that in this episode of taking away the shame or the fear of it of, oh well, I can't be a tough person if I go to therapy, or if a guy is
Mhm.
especially like, well, I can't be a tough man if I go to therapy. Well, one, obviously I'm not a man myself, but I do know a lot of men that go to therapy and that it actually really helps. So hopefully that
Yeah.
encourages you to go as well.
That's a
Yeah.
good, and that the point you made about it not being shameful and speaking to somebody. Also, therapists are trained in different things. So
Mhm.
sometimes you can get with one and it may not work, not because they're not trying to help you. A trauma therapist versus a different that's trained in someone that's trained in something else, you might not get the help that you need. They might just be helping you with maybe surface things, but maybe you do need to go a psychologist who might be trained in PTSD or different. So there are different trainings, just like there are different doctors out there. There's an OBGYN versus an eye doctor. Just you can go to those doctors, but if you go to the eye doctor for what the OBGYN can do, it's not going to be as helpful. He might tell you some nice stuff, but one, they have different skills. So I think pointing out that people that you do have to keep going and do really research what is you can now go down and they list their research. Like I help with this, I can help with this, I can help with, I can help with addiction, I can help with someone who might not do addiction, might do PTSD. So
Mhm.
just encouraging people to really look at their skills. You're allowed to do that. You pick from what they have that will be most help you. And I hope that encourages people to get help if they need it.
Yes, and thank you for adding that aspect because it is important to know that. Like the example of the doctor, obviously you wouldn't go to an eye doctor if you broke your foot or vice versa. Like it just
Right.
um so that's a really good thing to put into the minds as well. And with that, what made you decide to share your face so much with those around you?
Freedom. That's the one world I can sum it up with freedom. So one of the things I did to break my fear, and people can do things in different ways, but I have learned that I am a experienced person. I and I'm visual, and I need tangible things to do, tangible steps, and I was so sick of being afraid. Like I was just tired of fearing everything all the time. If you knew me, if you talked to me, I'd be like, people would be like, "Oh, you're not going to do that." I'm like, "Sure not. I am a chicken. I will be a chicken. You are not making me do that. I am not ashamed of being a chicken." Like I owned the fear. I owned being a chicken. I sure am, and you're not going to make me do it. So no amount of making fun of me or whatever is going to make me go do that thing or step out and do something different. I'm not doing it. Um, but there was a point. One again, it goes back to my daughter. I realized what some of my behaviors I inadvertently passed on to her. She was watching me because children, when you have a child, you are their first environment that they're learning social skills from. They're
Yeah.
learning their cues from. I didn't necessarily have to tell her to be afraid, but if she watches mommy in a situation, mommy gets afraid. Well, then subconsciously, that's how she learns to react. And seeing sometimes her react in some ways that made me sad. And I'm like, no, honey, you can't do that. And then I thought, well, who did she see do that? And I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. Something has got to break. And I decided to jump out of a plane. So I signed up to skydive. And about 3 weeks ago, I jumped out of a plane. Um, one of the greatest things I've ever done. One of the most terrifying but greatest things I've ever done. Um, and and I'm glad I did it because the instructor I had, I know he was made for me too that day. But when he came up, he said, "Well, why are you here?" And I said, "I'm trying. I want to overcome fear." He was like, "Really?" He said, "Do you know I was afraid of speaking, doing public speaking?" And so the first time I did this was my fear of overcoming public speaking, and I jumped out, and I've been doing it every 30 years ever since. And I'm like, it's like even God made the right guy for me that day, the right instructor, the right partner for me to do it. So um, that's what I did. That was my big break. And ever since then, I have been watching things just fall in line because it doesn't mean I don't feel fear. It doesn't mean I don't feel shame or it doesn't come up. Um, it means I can now go through it. But before I would get to it and stop because I didn't know what was on the other side, or I would fear what would happen, or what would people think of me, or I can't say that, or I can't do that. I'm just, I all the things that would stop me. When I jumped out of that plane and I landed, I had proof that there was something on the other side of fear. I had tangible proof. So now when I do something and I feel it, I'm like, oh, I know what this feels like because you can't terrify me any more than falling 120 miles an hour for 40 seconds. So you can't scare me any more than that. So now it's like, but I know what's on the other side now. I have living proof that there is something on the other side if you just go through it. So that's what I needed. So um, that's why I got back into my podcast and everything because I was like, I want other people to know that you don't have to stay there. There's something on the other side. That's why I'm sharing. I I I felt like if I could just tell one person that you don't have to stay there, you don't have to stay in it. You're not alone, and what you're feeling may be valid, but there is something on the side of it. If you just go through it, if you just get the help, if you just find the steps, there is something on the other side, and that is the biggest reason because somebody's out there waiting on me, and I can't sit here in fear um, because I don't want to offend anybody, or I don't want to worry about what I'm saying, or I don't, all of the things that come up in your mind. And really, the other thing that I felt convicted by it too, by me sitting in my fear and shame. How many people are sitting there waiting on me, and God's like, I put him there, but you're not doing anything.
That's a really good point to say because
So I was convicted also that I'm sitting there while somebody's waiting on me, and so that was big. It was the conviction. It wasn't shame. God wasn't shaming me into it. He wasn't trying to put me out there and not let me work through my fear, but he was also saying like, somebody's waiting on you, and you got to get past it. And so that's been my biggest thing. And I say it now as much as I can say it. Whoever's waiting on me, I'm coming. I'm coming for you now because I want you to be as free as I don't want you to sit in the dark with thoughts and then shame, and then shame turns to self-loathing, and self-loathing turns to I'm not worth it, and then I'm not worth it. Then why I even be here? Why do I need to wake up? There's no point in me even waking up, and why don't I do everybody a favor and just not like it just keeps spiraling. And I'm coming for you because if I can do it, anybody can. There's a way out. You don't have to sit in it. I want freedom, and that scripture says, "Who the sun sets free is free indeed." That is my goal.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. And like I said, the last question, there's a lot to take from that. But the thing that I wanted to, I guess, highlight the most is especially for those that may have kids of their own or have a next generation in your family, you're the generation that they're looking up to, like she mentioned.
Yeah.
And having that accountability and like seeing it in front of your face, like, oh, she learned it from me. Okay, that means I really
Hmm.
need to step it up. And I mean, this can be in any aspect as well. If you're not a parent,
Absolutely.
and if you are coaching, if you are running a business and have a team under you. Like they're gonna do what you're doing. For myself, I'm an online business owner, and they're gonna work as hard as I'm working, or vice versa. So if you want the results in a business per se, but you're not getting the results, you can't expect somebody else to get the results that you're not getting. And I think that is a really big thing that you can say in faith as well, because if you want people around you or that you're either parenting yourself or working with to have a really great relationship with God and trust him with everything, but if you're not doing the same, well, they're going to be like, well, Rachel's not doing that, why would I do it?
Yep.
It just really goes to show that we as humans in general are very visual, I believe. I mean, I know I'm a very visual person. Like somebody will try to explain something to me audibly and I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. Give me a picture, give me something. Like, I need to be able to see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it honestly, I think, drives my husband nuts because he's a audible person for most of the time. And I was like, that's great. I'm really happy for you, but drop me a picture.
Yeah.
um, and I
That's true.
also, another huge thing I think in faith too is that in having faith, we can't always draw that picture. And for myself, that's
Mm.
been a really hard thing because when God says, like, oh, go do this podcast, Rachel, or oh, go build this faith-based business, and then that was it. That's all he gave me. And I'm like, but where's the picture, God? Like
Where are the other 5 steps?
yeah, I'm like,
Send me the other.
yeah,
Can you go ahead and give me the other 20? I'll go if you just give me those other. I'm game. I'm good to go. I just need you to lay out the other 20.
like give me a month plan or like something, and that's not how God works. Like he
Yep.
does the next step, and I don't remember the exact scripture, but like the light at our feet, like there's a reason that that's there, is because he gives you just the next one to be obedient. And the fact of talking about freedom and fear and your
Hmm.
mindset, like that, those are all things that you can pray about, those are all things that you can work with or have God work through you to overcome and really
Hmm.
have the, like the question I asked, have the deliverance from, because I've also felt that in my mindset as well. I grew up basically being my worst critic, and it was really hard
Oh,
being negative on myself all the time. Like when I was in
yeah.
school, bad grade, like my mom already knew. She's like, "You've already beat yourself up enough. I don't need to say anything. I know that you're already upset with yourself, so like let's move forward." And she was 100% right. Like I looked at that like C or B or whatever it was, and is like, "Oh, you're horrible. You did this wrong. Like look at that, da da da." And it
Wow.
just goes down the spiral, like Marisha was saying, and how it, like once you start in that negative spiral, it's hard to get yourself out. And I think that's just a normal human thing. So for you, the listener, if you're in the middle of a negative mindset like that, or you feel like you can't talk to anybody, one, I always want to make it very clear that you can message me in my DMs, whatever you feel comfortable in messaging me, and I will pray for you. I will talk you through as much as I can, or direct you to somebody I know that could be a better resource. That's another huge reason why I have the podcast. And two, I'm sure there's somebody out there that relates in some way or some aspect as we.
Yeah, that's true. I like the way you said that making sure you reach out to people. I remember I spiraled so bad it got really bad, and I usually tell myself, the phrase I tell myself is, don't follow the thought, because if you follow it down, I pictured it like, I'm visual, so I pictured it like there's dark forest and there's a hand reaching out, and you can either follow the thought, take the hand and follow it into the woods, or you don't. And there are moments when you don't have the, sometimes with mental health, you don't have the ability not to follow the thought. You, for some reason, you take the hand and you follow it into the dark. And you're then once you're in there, you're like, you keep going deeper and deeper into the woods. And then you look around like, I can't get out. I don't even have the ability to pray. I don't, I can't even think of a scripture to say. I don't got it. So now what do I do? And one of the things I've learned is, and I've thought of it like a hand, if you just call out, so pick up your phone and call somebody and say, like, I can't think of anything positive to say. I can't even think of a prayer. I don't got it, is what I tell some people. I just don't got it. I that's all I got. I don't have anything. Sometimes there's somebody that can hold you up and pull you up when you don't have the strength to do it yourself. When the thoughts are so bad, you can't hear outside of that. So my biggest thing is don't trust the thought. You can't trust the thought that you're thinking. Even if it sounds, the self loathing you're talking about, where you're just going and going, don't trust the thought. And the second thing is reach out for somebody, call out. And the way I think about that is if you call out and you're lost in the woods, but people are searching for you, guess what happens when you're in the dark? You start seeing light because they're calling you. Hey, where are you at? I'm here.
Mhm.
Say your name. Where are you so we can come to you? But you notice you see flashlights in the dark. So when you call out, light comes in. So that's my other encouragement is call out because that lets the light into the darkness. So I hope that that helps people too. But I liked what you said about the reaching out and reaching out to you. That's calling out and letting the light into the dark place. And when the light is in the dark place, the dark can't it can't stay there. That doesn't mean that the person reaching in maybe is not the expert, but I think of it like if you broke your leg and you call a friend to come help you, they take you to the place of help. They
Mhm.
can take you to the expert. So if maybe you can't walk or you can't get out of that thought, somebody can come and get you to the expert, can get you help. So even thinking of it like that, okay, I can't get out of this, but if I call somebody, they can get me to help. And that's what you're trying to get to.
For sure. Thank you for sharing all that. That is really good insight. And listeners, I hope that you take at least just a small part of the things that we've talked about. And we're not even halfway through the questions. So,
I
um,
love your question.
thank you. And with that, the next one is, do you bring your faith background into your new public speaking career?
I do. I am. I just did another one at the other day at a back to school event. I'm learning to get better at it. I took a workshop for speaking, so part of that workshop was us going out and doing different exercises. So, pray for me. If it's not perfection, I'm trying. I'm getting there. If you hear this podcast, it's not Rachel. It's me learning. So don't hold her to any imperfections that I say. Um, I'm learning. But yes, I do bring that in. And pretty much my speech has really been about breaking off fear and living in freedom and how I did that. And there's a lot more to it of learning that, some of destroying your old coping mechanisms takes you faith, not just my faith, but it takes me learning a new way to do things and encouraging and giving people tips on, okay, I use my faith, but I also use another tool of here's what I do to think of a different thought when that thing comes that I can't overcome. And it scientifically, your brain, if you have had bad thoughts or trauma in one way, there's an actual groove in your brain. It actually makes like a path in your brain. But if you learn to redo it in a healthy way, you actually make new paths. So just encouraging people, like when people say it can't be done or it's too hard, it can. And me incorporating my faith into practical ways that have helped me is one of the ways I try to help with my background of what has worked for me to hopefully help other people.
I love it. And also, thank you for bringing up the scientific part of it because I thought about that before with the grooves in your brain. That's a very well studied thing that has been come up in a lot of different people's lives I know. And for myself, I can see it now that I've really worked on my mindset and been more in the word of God and just going to therapy. Like, I
Hmm.
can see when I get in a negative set and like my brain will just be like, oh, yeah, this is normal. We go back here and we say that we're a
Yep.
horrible person. And like, it just takes off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I thought one thing, like, how did it? But then to learn that that's physically your brain, like just doing what it's done before and having to I will say having to reroute your brain, for lack of better words, is not easy.
It's hard.
It takes patience. It takes prayer. At least in my experience, it has.
Yep.
And that just goes to show that it's another thing that's worth it. But it will make you work for it, really, if it's been a hard lesson for you. If you relate to either of our stories in that aspect. And then that also goes into my second question, which you kind of already answered. So I'll ask if there's anything else about public speaking overall that you wanted to mention, because I just wanted to make sure you got that in there as well.
Just well, yes, I think there's just I'm learning to step out on a limb and do things that are uncomfortable. So one of the things about healing is you're going to have to do it a different way. How I was used to doing everything Part of healing and part of freedom is being willing to go a different way. So the aspect of speaking and the things that I talk about too are just sometimes you got to learn to do it a different way, and that's hard. You just said it. It's so hard. When I have to go up there and speak, I'm like, oh man, I know I'm fine when I start getting into it, but until then, your whole stomach feels like it's going to turn upside down. My legs feel like they're going to just give out. Um, but I have a purpose, and I keep going to back to that. I jumped out of that plane, and that there is another side. So when I'm standing, I'm like, there's another side of this. You'll get to the end of that speech, and hopefully, what you're there for is that God speaks to somebody, even if it's just one person. And this is not for you, this is for His glory. So keeping that in mind helps. Doesn't make it perfect because we're not perfect. And I like to tell people if you're looking for perfection, sorry, you're not getting it here. But that's still the thing of being a Christian. Like you can still be used and not be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need you to come to God. You don't even need to be perfect to come to God. He just wants you to come. So, I think some of the illusions that maybe the church has, where we could have done better, is making people think that they have to be perfect before they can come, or we don't want to see their flaws. Just be perfect to show up. Then I that's not me. God loves you the way you are. Just come and He'll do the work. And then there's fellowship in that too. So um, yeah, just sharing those different aspects when I am speaking so that people know I'm here to be vulnerable and authentic and real. And sometimes you'll see not my perfect side, and that's okay too.
Thank you for saying that, because especially with going to church and wanting to show like your Sunday best, quote unquote, of like, oh, we
Hmm.
go to church and like I'm in my best outfit and I feel great and everything's just honky dory, when really we're supposed to go to God in every moment of our lives. And when we're broken down and crying the worst we've ever cried in our life, or when we're having the best day ever and being like, wow, thanks God for that amazing day. And
Hmm.
is a spot to be able to do that. And in an example of my particular church I go to is considered a mega church, which I know not everybody loves that term, but it is a bigger church. And there is no dress code. Like our lead
Hmm.
pastor is very um important. That's a very important thing to him because he's had experiences in other churches where people just won't show up because they have to dress nice. Like he'll go
Yeah.
in a t-shirt and jeans. He's like, I don't care what you wear, as long as you're here, as long as you're getting the gospel. Like that's the thing that matters. And that's one aspect that I love to talk about because it really shows that it just takes down all of the quote unquote walls that you could have. And if you want to show up in whatever you're already wearing, if that's what you're comfortable in, great. Like just come and hear what God has to say to you, because there is a message there for you, regardless of what church you go to or what conversation you have with somebody. There's more than likely a reason
Hmm.
that you're having that conversation or in that event to hear something from God. And you could also bring that into public speaking too. Like if you go to one of the events, there's a reason you're there or a reason that you're speaking about the things that you are. So I think that's really cool. And with that, the next question I have is actually about church. So what is your favorite part about church overall, or the individual service?
I do love worship, but I actually all of it. I can't say one aspect of it. I do. I am more in tune with now community and fellowship and how important that is. Um, you just you can't do it alone, and there is a point, and I'm not saying, let me just say it right now, I'm not saying there's not church hurt. I am not saying that there aren't Christians who don't act like Christians. I am sorry in advance for them, uh and I mean that with the deepest sense. Like I have had church hurt, so I do understand how when people say, well, you need fellowship and you need, come because you need to not do this on your own, and that your Christian walk shouldn't be done by yourself. That's easier said than done when you've been hurt. Or it's just hard for you to open up if you're a person. Like, listen, I'm an introvert too. So, like, why do you want me to talk to you? I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone. I'm going to sit back here by myself, and I got everything I needed, and then peace out. I had to stop doing that. And then when I started opening up, just the fellowship was, I realized, is what you need to. There is something in that because they're getting encouraged. And those same people, like I talked about earlier, once you start having relationships, you can call and say, I need prayer or I need help. But if you don't have any relationship and there's no fellowship, you just go and leave, you're not getting all that you're meant to get from church. So I think that it's not just the message, it's not just the worship, it's the fellowship and the unity. That's a huge part of helping you on your walk. So overall, I would have to say it's the fellowship.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that because I mean, it is said in scripture that we're not meant to walk the world and to do anything alone. Like, there's a reason that we
Hmm.
feel that need or want to be able to talk to other people, regardless if you're introverted, extroverted, however you want to.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I definitely feel like I am an extrovert, but then there's also times that I feel like an introvert because I'm like, I just want to go home and not be around people. Like, please give me my space.
Yeah.
It really just I feel like depends on my mood on that aspect. But in in that, like, just being able to go and like we were saying, being able to talk to people that are maybe understand what you're going through, or maybe understand something that you've gone through, or are in a similar season of life that you are. I know that when you go to church
Hmm.
and you're maybe in your 20s, like I am, like, obviously talking to somebody that could be like the same age as your grandmother is a little bit of a disconnect just because you're in a different season of life. But that doesn't mean that you can't get
Hmm.
something super valuable from somebody that's in a different age category than you are, because made a lot of connections with people that are probably about the same age as my grandmother, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I've learned so much from you. Like, I could just sit here and just let you keep talking." Like, yep,
Yeah.
please tell me all the things, because if I don't have to make the mistake or if I don't have to do it that way, I won't. And that
That's good.
really God putting those people in my life, and I'm sure that He'll do the same for you listeners when you go into a church building in itself, or if you go to some sort of event that is faith related as well. And with that, what would you like the listeners to get out of our conversation today?
Um, that if I don't leave you with anything else, you don't have to stay in shame or fear. You don't have to stay in the dark. There is help out there. Um, if you can't get to anybody, I'm gonna always tell you my grandma told me you call on Jesus and he will hear you. Um, but I know that for everybody that's not always the easiest thing to do too. So even if you don't know him, find help. You don't have to stay in the dark. You don't have to stay in shame. You don't have to stay in perfectionism or um, people pleasing or unworthiness, aloneness. You're not alone. There it is. The biggest thing is you're not alone. That right there.
I love it. Thank you so much. And to close out our conversation, where is the best spot that people can find you after our conversation if they have questions or want to connect?
You can. I have my Instagram. That's at the Cap and Blazer podcast, or that's my regular one. Or you can find me on my regular Instagram. It's my name, Mareshah's Place. Um, you can find me at Mareshah's Place on Instagram as well. And you can DM me. I'll send you. And that the podcast and my Mareshah's Place will have the link for my YouTube channel as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And listeners, I will make sure to have all the links below this episode. So, in case you're driving or busy doing something else, you'll be able to connect with her as well and ask any questions that you have. As I know that she'd be more than welcome to have all the conversations, as we've had really good conversations before recording this podcast. And I just want to say a huge thank you for coming on, Marisha. I had a great time, and I really think this conversation is going to go a really, really long way. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful. You're doing an amazing job. I pray you continue to be blessed. You're doing wonderful.
And just like that, we're at the end of another amazing episode. I first want to say a huge thank you to you, the listener, for coming on and taking time out of your busy day, your busy schedule, your busy life to listen to what I have to say over here on This Is Me Attitude podcast. And I truly hope, like I mentioned before, that you got a lot out of today's episode. As always, I would love to hear what takeaway you got from the episode or what piece really stuck out to you over on Instagram at This is the Attitude Podcast. We do have our own Instagram page now. It's super exciting. Go follow us, go see what's over there. I share a lot of faith based quotes and then little snippets of each and every episode. And also, like I say at the end of every single episode, never, ever, ever forget God loves you.